Our new guest coming on the program, Jonathan Blau. He'll be joining us from time to time, of course, covering the Clemson Tigers from the Charleston Post and Courier. We'll get his thoughts on the upcoming matchup for the Tigers versus NC State again this weekend in Raleigh. So unique, to be 4 games into the college football season, which is incredible. And Clemson now for their first official road trip of the year. And again, out to the guest line we go. Jonathan Blau from the Charleston Post and Courier joins us. Jonathan, what's going on, man? Thanks for taking time out of your day to be a part of the show.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Look, this is unique in a lot of respects, and obviously you're new on the beat for Clemson, but temperature, we talk about it being relative, and it really feels like this year for me, having watched this program for many years, the judgments that the fans have, it's partially relative, right, to what they've seen in the past, but also still on the offensive side of the ball, this is a young group. What are you hearing out of Tiger Town, and what are your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, it's, Clemson has just won a lot of football games, and they've won it by having a really explosive offense. And Clemson fans are probably spoiled a little bit by 3 years of Trevor Lawrence and, a bunch of years of Travis Etienne. And now you got a lot of new faces on that offensive side of the ball. And I think you just assume just because Clemson's been this program that's been able to go to 6 straight college football playoffs that it's just going to keep going. You got DJ Uiagalelei. He's the number 1 guy in the 2020 class as a pocket passer. You got Will Shipley, the 5-star running back. The recruiting, at offensive line, I think has been a thing people have always looked at. Can Clemson keep up there with the top tier schools, the Alabamas? It seems to be picking up a little bit, and you just think they're going to be able to plug and play and, do what they're going to do. But at the end of the day, I think Dabo Swanny was talking about that a lot this week. I think he even said these aren't video game players. They're real human beings. They're learning on the fly. And some of it's been a little ugly, and it's below the expectations that Clemson fans have. At the same time, there's probably a balance between things that you could be frustrated about, which absolutely in terms of the execution and some of the things that they haven't been able to do to score points, you can absolutely be frustrated with. But at the same time, maybe some patience is warranted given all the new faces. So it is kind of like a balance of figuring out how mad to be, I guess, about it.
Again, you can read all his work over at postandcourier.com. Jonathan Blau joining us here on the program on a Wednesday afternoon. And, I don't know whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage for Clemson that you're 4 games in before you have your first real road test. But from the outside looking in, the confidence level as they head into this game, Jonathan, for you is?
Matt Bockhorst, if you listen to him talk, he was pretty fired up in terms of the comments he made during the week. And, I don't know if it's confident or if it's mad, if it's wanting to prove something to people in terms of, we're better than you guys think we are at this point. I think it's rather high. I don't get a sense that the confidence is lacking. We talked to DJ Uiagalelei. He's a very, passive, calm guy for the most part. He seemed to still didn't seem fidgety when we were talking to him either. I think they understand that this is a process and that, there are some things that have gone wrong and some things that haven't been great, but they're kind of sticking to that process. And I think this is a great game to kind of check the temperature of really where they are and what the trajectory is. If it's another game that's, 17-13 and they're barely squeaking it out, it's close. Maybe it's time to get a little more worried. But, if they assert themselves and they really, execute in ways that we haven't seen thus far, I think it's a sign that things are kind of trending the way you want them to be. So I think it was a really important game, and we'll see how it works out.
Jonathan, based off of DJ's play a year ago against Notre Dame, a 400-plus yard passing performance, and as a matter of fact, leading Clemson down the field to put them in the lead late. It was really Clemson's defense that allowed that game to go to overtime if you go back and watch it. Do you think the expectations for DJ were overinflated just given that singular performance a year ago?
No, absolutely. The way he played was just lights out. And I think people are forgetting some of the supporting pieces that were there. I mean, you had a Cade Stewart and a Jackson Carman on the offensive line. You had an Amari Rogers, that just outlet guy in the slot. You just throw it to him, and he's going to go pick up yards in space. You had Travis Etienne. I mean, you had all of these veterans around him, and the situation was just different. And so now you plug in a true freshman left guard, Marcus Tate there. You take, Jordan McFadden, turn him from right tackle to left tackle. You take Matt Bockhorst, take him from left guard to center. That's a very different offensive line. That's a very different group to get used to. You don't have Travis Etienne as that, bailout guy, just hand the ball to, or to find out of the backfield. You have some, Justin Ross just came back. He missed a whole year. I mean, he's kind of getting himself back into just the swing of things, it seems like, and he seems to be trending up. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think the way DJ was able to get the ball downfield, the way he was able to, just kind of thread that defense of Notre Dame, I think put expectations sky high, especially considering his pedigree and everything he did in high school as well. It just seemed like if it was just going to follow that track, it would make all the sense in the world, and it hasn't. But at the same time, it's a different team around him. It's a different set of circumstances being the guy, not just kind of preparing for one or two games and going in there. So, yeah, I think expectations were really high, and they should have been, just considering what we saw. But it's not, at the same time, when you take a step back from it, it's not completely surprising that there would be some struggles, just considering all of the pieces around him that he's adjusting to. And again, just being the guy and being compared to Trevor Lawrence, that is really hard. yeah, just himself from last year is hard enough, DJ, with those couple games he had. But, Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent. Tony Elliott, I think, even said, it's tough being compared to a guy at the very end of his career. And that's kind of what DJ is dealing with right now. So, yeah, I think the expectations were really high. He hasn't quite met them, but it's not like he can't get there unless there's some more continuity with him and his teammates surrounding him.
On Twitter at John_Blau. That's BLAU. Go follow him right now. He covers the Clemson Tigers for the Charleston Post and Courier. And some other news that came out of Clemson this week was Lynn J Dixon's decision to go enter the transfer portal. He's going to finish up and get his degree, which Dabo Swanny said that he was excited about. We kind of saw this brewing, so to speak, the suspension or for a portion of the opener against Georgia, and then a weird scenario where he started the SC State game to only vanish for a little bit. Look, I think Lynn J, for people who cover and have followed Clemson and love the Clemson Tigers, kind of been known that it's kind of been a hot and cold relationship for Lynn J, maybe in this coaching staff for a while. But even still, how surprising was it, in your opinion, to see him go ahead and go into the portal this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a brave new world with this transfer portal. Guys can go in there, jump in there, get a head start. He can try to get somewhere for the spring. He's immediately eligible. Obviously, with the grad transfer rule, there was that too. But it has changed things. And when you heard some of the things we were talking about, the last couple of weeks where, there was a team rules violation, and then, he, like you said, disappears kind of a little bit in this SC State game, and you hear that he's in Spiller's doghouse. And he's got to work things out between him and CJ Spiller in terms of accountability on the field, off the field. It's kind of like he has two choices to make. I mean, it's either he's going to kind of figure out how to make this work with CJ Spiller and how to make it work for him on this team, or you go to the portal and you figure out another place to go that you feel like you can finish your career at. And sometimes, it's not either person's fault. It's just personalities don't always mesh, and these things happen. And I don't know really kind of the details in terms of how it went down, but it wasn't totally surprising. Everything we heard in terms of, there being a little bit of a disconnect there. And you have Will Shipley and Kobe Pace, who seem to kind of have passed him in the depth chart. And those are two really talented players there as well. So not totally surprising. And again, this is just a different world now with the transfer portal and immediate eligibility. And if he wants to go find a place where he can be the guy for one last year, he can go ahead and do that. And that seems to be the choice he made.
Again, John's fantastic work over at You mentioned the portal. Dabo Swanny was asked about parity in college football. He brought up the portal. I mean, as somebody that's kind of watched this game for a while, I mean, is that where you lean to, that this transfer portal is creating parity where, and again, not Oregon beating Ohio State. I think everybody knows Oregon had a chance to be a really good team, may very well still be. But I mean, some of these matchups we've seen across the country, and I don't want to say that Jacksonville State beating Florida State is an exact example of that either, but it does feel like these quote front runners that we've had for so long, John, are sort of coming back to the pack, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting mix of, factors this year, because you not only have the portal, and actually I came from covering IU, Indiana University, and they brought a bunch of, guys in through the portal who were juniors and seniors, 50-year guys, who they could, make their team more mature, more experienced. That's something you can do. But there's also, with this COVID year, you look at Clemson, I mean, they have Nolan Turner, James Skalski, these 60-year guys. There are more teams that have those types of players who've just been around and played a lot of football. And you get these whole groups back that were supposed to either graduate or, are supposed to be gone by now, and they're not. And so I think James Skalski even had the comparison himself. I think he was asked about it, and he said, yeah, I mean, it makes sense with this parity, because you think about, college basketball, all these really experienced teams from these smaller conferences. I don't know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like Manhattan or something like that goes on a run, against some of these blue blood programs. That's because they've all been together and they're mature, and they can, on any given, I guess, whatever day of the week basketball be played, but this is
Right.
Saturday,
Yeah.
they can win a game. And so I think that's part of it. I think the super seniors, I think it's part of it with the transfer portal too. I mean, some teams, and I think Dabo addressed this too. He doesn't like the portal to an extent, because why would you recruit a high school kid? And there's a fear that that's going to take away opportunities for high school kids, because, you're just going to go recruit the best, juniors and sophomores from college football that you can. But I think that's possible. There's just a lot going on that's changed the landscape, and we had parity before this though too. I mean, there were upsets before, so it's not completely new. But I do think that there's a little bit of an increase in that, just because of the maturity of teams, and also the ability of some of these teams to go pick off players from other programs.
Yeah, it's certainly beginning to feel that way. And I think, too, flip it from the player's perspective, they can kind of evaluate the roster and go, oh, okay, well, I'd fit in at school X. And then you see a guy like Ches Malusi, the former Clemson running back, fitting in at Wisconsin, a program that's really known to rush the football. So you can kind of post a high school decision, make another decision, and maybe better yourself for the future. Again, John Blau joining us here on the show that shakes the Southland today. Clemson Sports Talk for Tiger fans in the Midlands. The folks watching us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button to be a part of the program. And we're going to lock in with John here on the program for the foreseeable future, hopefully, as it fits his schedule on Wednesday afternoons, to talk about everything going on up in Tiger Town. And from that standpoint, preseason, John, the other thing was people were talking up NC State as a team that might knock off Clemson if they were the rendition that people thought Clemson would be. How much of that, from the Dave Doran saga that's kind of surrounded his rivalry, so to speak, with Dabo Swanny, the fact that Clemson's got a huge winning streak in this series, the fact that for years NC State was kind of deemed as outside of Florida State as the other kind of football program in the league that Clemson had to deal with. I mean, this feels like one of those games where the Wolfpack and the folks up in Raleigh got to be chomping at the bit to get their hands on Clemson on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game, I think, before the season even started, that all of us were looking at and saying, this is the ACC game that was going to be a problem for Clemson, just because they had so much experience. I mean, Dabo Swanny was talking about it this week. I think now with Peyton Wilson, the sophomore linebacker who got hurt, it's either 17 or 18 returning starters between the offense and defense, but still a really, really good number of players. Devin Leary, their quarterback, I think Dabo Swanny called him a baller. I mean, just a guy, just a really, really good player. The offensive line's athletic. You look at the defense, and Georgia Tech gave Clemson some problems with the 3-3-5, rush 3, drop 8. And that's what North Carolina State does a lot of. So you're going to have the same type of issues there on the defensive side. So, this is a really interesting game. And in ways, I think North Carolina State kind of reminds me of Clemson, coming into this. I mean, if you look at Mississippi State, that loss, they passed for over 300 yards in that game. I mean, it's not like they weren't able to move the ball. They just threw an interception, right when they got down to the goal line. I mean, they get across the midfield marker and they fumble a ball. They have a turnover on downs in the Mississippi State 36. They have a kick return touchdown they give up. I mean, I think Nolan Turner said it as well. That just didn't, you watch the tape, it didn't seem like a game they lost 24-10. It's not really characteristic just looking at the score. But they are shooting themselves in the foot as well. So I get kind of which team is going to, execute better and not have those types of mistakes. I mean, they would have a really good chance of winning this game. But if I'm Clemson, this is a team that I'm definitely concerned about. There's no issue at all getting mentally, prepared for this one.
It is a strange dynamic how this entire season has sort of shifted just in one weekend with the performance against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. You mentioned that defensive look that they gave Clemson. The question that I really have still from my side, and I've tried to ask Tony Elliott and Dabo Swanny, just kind of about, how does that happen? Like, it is still hard for me to imagine that given the additional break Clemson had, that given the fact that these young men have all played football, that, I know you got a limited amount of time to prepare and they hit you with something you weren't expecting. But I saw a tweet that said, can you imagine if Vanderbilt threw something that Nick Saban in Alabama hadn't seen, what that game would still look like? And I think that's the point that Clemson Tiger fans are making, right? They're saying, look, you got better Jimmys and Joes than these guys. You got to be able to adjust and win that game decisively. I think that's probably the big concern Clemson fans have. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes absolute sense, because when I heard it, what I'm hearing is that you're saying Georgia Tech, a team that you scored 73 points on last year. I know with different offensive pieces, we already talked about that. But that team was able to bring a defensive game plan to you that you had to adjust to, and they don't have to adjust to you. That you weren't able to. Like, I understand they were able to run the ball well enough to be able to win that game, but you didn't run it well enough that they decided to get out of that look. I mean, if they're dropping 8 and rushing 3, your hope, I understand Clemson fans' hope would be that you're going to average more than 3.9 yards per carry in that situation. But at the same time, you do have to cut them a little bit slack, where the one issue, the big issue, is up front. I mean, it's just they've got so many different pieces that have moved around, and they haven't quite gelled. And when you have, again, it's rush 3, drop 8, but you do have these, they call them overhang, the defenders that are sitting there, and you're in the zone blocking scheme, and you need everybody to be on the same page, those 5 guys. And if you're zone blocking and you're not keying on the right guys, I mean, it can look ugly. I mean, there were multiple times just rewatching that game. And again, it's Marcus Tate, he's a true freshman. He's not blocking anybody. He doesn't seem to know where to go. Those are issues. But at the same time, yes, like, absolutely. When you hear that, in Alabama, you would think, or another program of Clemson, via being so successful, has put themselves up there in terms of being one of those upper echelon programs, and having so much success, everybody expects them to be able to do better than that. If Georgia Tech gives you a look, you defeat it, and so that they have to change their look, but they're not able to do that right now. That is concerning. In a way, it makes sense because of what they're dealing with. And again, these aren't quote unquote video game players like Dabo Swanny said, but it is something that has to get better, and you hope that those 5 up front get more cohesive, and so that, again, because they're going to see it again. And I think Matt Bockhorst had a good quote. He said, like, if the whole ACC wants to do this, they want to rush 3 and play 2 cloud, bring it on.